NASCAR will not ban Christopher Bell from stopping in other people's pit stalls, or actually any driver for that matter. Eddie Jordan, the former Formula One team owner, has sadly passed away, and I think we all need to remember that NASCAR has its own bracket coming later this summer. Welcome back to Break Hard. I'm Matt. If your team didn't make it to March Madness and is in the bracket this year, welcome to the club, because neither did mine. And instead of firing our head coach and moving on and trying it with a different one, we decided to retain him and our terrible football coach and our terrible athletic director to just really cement a few more seasons of just being at the absolute bottom of the Big 12. But we're not here to talk about basketball. Instead, we're here to talk about racing, something you and I both care about here. And we're going to start off with what NASCAR announced on Thursday. They further clarified the situation that happened this past weekend at the Las Vegas Motor Speedway, where Christopher Bell pulled out of his pit stall and stopped further down pit road, and his teammates' pit stall had them tighten the left front tire on his car, send him back out on the racetrack. Now, NASCAR has clarified that that is still allowed. They will not be banning that. I know some people want it banned. That's not going to happen. This is a safety issue after all, and that's what NASCAR cited here as well. Teams, cars will be allowed to be serviced outside of their pit stall for safety issues. That being a loose wheel, getting the fuel can off of the car if it's stuck in the car or underneath the car, getting the jack if it's stuck underneath the car, or pulling the wedge wrench out of the car as well. That is all acceptable. Teams, drivers can pull into other pit stalls and have that service done. Now, if there is a performance change done to the race car, something that is not one of those four things I just listed there, that is going to result in a lap or laps penalty, depending on the type of service that was done to the car. Now, if you do come down pit road and you have your car serviced for a safety issue like that in another team's pit stall, they tighten the wheel for you or whatever. If it's under caution, you start at the rear of the field. If it's under green, it is a pass-through penalty that just goes by the flag rules, essentially, is what's going on here. So I think that's a good thing. I think that's totally fine. I think that's perfectly acceptable. Now, there's going to be the argument that teams that are only one car or maybe even two cars are at a disadvantage here. And maybe, possibly, that is true. You're also at a disadvantage if you are further down the pit lane towards pit out. Like, if you're in one of the first 5 pit stalls, yeah, you don't have the luxury of pitting at the first stall and then having to drive past, 35 other ones on your way down to exit pit road. And Christopher Bell was in the perfect situation on Sunday to be able to utilize having his teammate further down pit road than he was. Now, of course, if you get the pole and you just roll off pit road, yeah, sucks. You're not going to get the luxury of that. Ultimately, I am totally fine with this because it's a safety issue, mainly under green. Because if you come off pit road under green at a high-speed oval and you come out and your wheel falls off and then it goes up on the racetrack, a car hits it and it goes over the fence and into the grandstands, that's really bad news. That's super bad news. That's IndyCar in Atlanta level of bad news, and we don't want that. We really don't want that at all. So I am okay with it. They're not going to allow teams to take advantage of this. They're still going to get penalized for pitting outside of their pit stall. All of that is totally fine with me. I really don't have an issue with this. I know some people likely will, and I think that you just have to look at it from the safety aspect of it. Nobody's gaining a performance advantage from this, and ultimately they do have to serve a penalty as well. Forward thinking on Adam Stevens' part last weekend in Las Vegas. Great, ability by Christopher Bell to find that gap to get over to the 19th pit box. Again, the team that still lost a wheel earlier in the race, and now you're trusting them to tighten your wheel down, taking your life into your own hands there, like you're flying. I wanted to say Frontier, but I mean, Delta's the last plane that flipped over, right? So not ideal there, but regardless, it's fine. I don't have an issue with this at all. Getting into some sad news on Thursday, former Formula One owner and BBC presenter, as well as Channel 4 presenter, Eddie Jordan has sadly passed away at the age of 76. He had battled a 12-month long battle with prostate cancer and passed away in South Africa on Thursday morning, surrounded by his family, which is always nice. Eddie Jordan, if you're not familiar with him, if you're not a Formula One person, if you're new to Formula One, was an absolute rock star. He was flamboyant. He was willing to do anything and everything to promote his team, and was always down for a photo shoot. Some of those F1 yearbooks behind me right here from the 2003, 2004, 2005 season, Yeah, there's some pictures of Eddie in there, and you're like, yeah, this dude loved the fact that he was in Formula One and he was in the position he was in. He was a fun guy. He owned the Jordan Grand Prix team from 1991 until it ultimately sold in 2005 to what was then Midland F1. The team then was sold to Spiker. And then Force India became Racing Point and is now today known as the Aston Martin Formula One team. But the team also gave Michael Schumacher his first ever start in Formula One at the 1991 Belgian Grand Prix. They won their first race in 1998 together. They would go on to win 4 races in total, the Jordan Grand Prix team. In 1998, they won the Belgian Grand Prix, a very rainy Belgian Grand Prix, with Damon Hill. 1999, they would win 2 races with Heinz Harald Frentzen, and for a moment, think that they were in the championship battle. They ultimately did not end up winning it. And their last win came in 2003 at the Brazilian Grand Prix with Giancarlo Fisichella, which that race was first awarded the win was to Kimi Räikkönen, and then ultimately upon review was given back to Fisichella, that Jordan team there. And then, like I said, in 2005, he sold to Midland, and now it's Lawrence Stroll's baby in Aston Martin F1. But Eddie was a guy that was always around the sport. After he sold his team off, he did, F1 presenting for both BBC and for Channel 4. I thought he always had good takes. Always appreciated to hear what Eddie had to say about things. I think that he was a guy that absolutely had his pulse on Formula One and sort of the interactings that, were happening. Last year, he brokered the deal to get Adrian Newey out of Red Bull and for him to join Aston Martin. So this guy was just an absolute workhorse, a guy that was devoted to Formula One. And it sucks to see somebody get taken, early like that. I guess that there's solace in it. It's the fact that this dude lived one hell of a life and had a lot of fun while he was doing it. And hey, he was one of the few people that started off as a privateer, managed to get some good engine deals, managed to win 4 Grand Prix, like just a really, really impressive run for him. Also, Grands Prix. My apologies there. Grands Prix, not Grand Prix. That is a Pontiac. So yes, completely off topic there. Sad to see Eddie go. But at least, like I said, he had one hell of a run as a Formula One team owner and, as a BBC presenter as well, Formula One presenter. So yeah, Eddie Jordan, 76 years old. As March Madness is happening and everybody's brackets are going bust and you watch Clemson score 13 points in the first half, you're probably like, oh, this bracket thing's pretty fun. And we need to remember, NASCAR has its own in-season tournament happening this year when the races go to Prime and to TNT. So if you forgot about it, there will be a 32 driver bracket that will start at the Atlanta Motor Speedway night race on June 28th. That's a Saturday night race, and then carry on for the 5 races on TNT. It will start out as 32 drivers, 1v1. After the first race, guess what? We're going to go ahead and eliminate those down to 16, 8, 4 championship round as we get further down. You'll have 3 qualifying races, those being at Michigan, Mexico City, and Pocono before the challenge ultimately starts on June 28th. We're not racing in January, June 28th in Atlanta. And whoever the last driver standing is, ends up winning $1 million afterwards. Now, I don't think any fan really cares about a driver winning $1 million, but it is going to be a fun thing to build a bracket out for. It's definitely going to be fun for gambling if you're into that side of things, and ultimately should kind of spice up those summer months for NASCAR. Not that they necessarily need spicing up, but you throw a bracket challenge into an Atlanta race, like, hey, things are going to get kind of interesting there. You have Chicago street race in this as well. All right, that can be a wild card, as we've seen, well, the last 2 years, considering SVG won, Alex Bowman won a rain race there as well. I mean, it could be a bit sketchy. Very excited to get back to Chicago. I think that's going to be another great event this year. And then it's going to end at the Brickyard 400 as well. And last year we saw Kyle Larson put on an absolute clinic in this. So I think that it's going to be incredibly fun. I think one of the biggest questions is, like, if somebody gets knocked out early in this type of bracket, are they going to be able to affect their teammates or anything like that? Like, there's a lot of different scenarios that can happen here. And I think it's going to make for pretty interesting television, at least. At least it'll give us something to talk about. No offense to Pocono, which actually hasn't been bad the last couple of years, but you add one of these qualifyings into it, it's going to be pretty fun, as we get through there. The 3 races that lead up to the in-season tournament will be sort of the qualifiers for it. Race winners, of course, will be seated higher. And then from there on, you'll be seated by your best finishing position. If it's a tie, then you go to your second best. And if it goes from there, then you go to your point standings after that. And then drivers will be seated that way. But going to Atlanta for the first one, chances are we're going to see some accidents because it is a super speedway race. Could certainly throw a wrench into this entire bracket, and maybe we get a Cinderella type of story. I think that would be a kind of a fun thing to track as we head on through this. But ultimately, yeah, is it gimmicky? Maybe, but it doesn't really affect the on-track racing product. It's more just about finishes, and maybe it incentivizes these guys to race a little bit harder, try something different, but ultimately, it's going to give us something to talk about. It's going to create storylines. It's probably going to piss some people off, and if you're Kyle Busch or, actually, if you're Carson Hocevar, watch out for Kyle Busch because he still is just not happy about Hocevar at all. He even talking to Harvick this week, called back to when Hocevar was like 13 or 14, racing him at Kalamazoo and a super late model. And Kyle was pissed about that. And I say that Hocevar is 22 now. So it was really only like 8 years ago, but Kyle's still mad about it today. And at some point, those two are going to have a run-in, right? Like, it just feels like that's going to happen. And hey, maybe it happens during this in-season tournament and, tempers will fly. So either way, kind of excited about it. So let me know in the comments what you think about NASCAR clarifying the Christopher Bell situation, Eddie Jordan sadly passing away on the Formula One side of things, and the in-season tournament that will be coming up before we even know it at this point. So like and subscribe to the channel. Follow me on TikTok at BreakHard, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook at BreakHard.